Hey guys, Skylar Harpo here, also known as Mason. I'm gonna close my door before I start this because today we're doing something new, YouTube. I am going to be reading a creepypasta. So, I hope everyone enjoys this, and let's get started. Today we are reading the story Rainbow Factory. Now, A Rainbow's Tale isn't quite as nice as the stories we knew of Sugar and Spice. There's long been rumors as to how exactly rainbows are made in Equestria. While there's a great amount of Pegasi ponies are employed in the rainbow department of the Weather Factory, almost all of them do low-end work. What's known is that great streams of spectra, the individual colors of the rainbow, flow through large grates and into vast vats. From there, workers carefully and equally mix the spectra into the coagulated rainbow pools that dot and run through the factory and the surrounding city. Next, that mixture is pumped to the floor below, where other employees automize it and store it until the active weather Pegasi deploy it in the field. However, no one knows how individual spectra is made. Supplies are never seen being brought in, leaving no even a clue what goes into a rainbow. Tourists, when visiting the factory, are treated to an extremely foreboding and plain wall with massive solid doors barring entry to any pony at any time. When most of the facility's various signs and architecture is bubbly and welcoming, the Rainbow Factory's upper floor was protected by harsh imagery and potential hazards and death. And the cloud wall was not made out of the clean white of the rest of the city, but black, quietly thundering fog. To become an employee of the Upper Rainbow Factory meant sacrificing any life outside of those black walls. Workers are sworn to secrecy and forbidden from leaving, and live inside the facility itself. Those few who ever managed to make it out, not in a body bag, were twisted and disturbed, too damaged to ever bring themselves to talk about it. A lot of theories were proposed: dark magic from captured unicorns, chemicals and environmental hazards that no sane pony would tolerate, and even thoughts of another unknown sister of Celestia's, destined to create the spectra instead of raising the sun or moon. None of them could be farther from the truth. But a rainbow's easy once you get to know it with the help of the magic of a Pegasus device. Come on, Orion. We're gonna be late for our final test, School called to a friend of hers. She was older now, in her last year of flight school. She, like all the other Pegasus in the school, was terribly nervous about the final test. Those that passed were granted freedom into the world to find their cutie mark if they hadn't yet, and become working ponies. Little is known, or at least little thought about the fact, was what happened to the ones that failed. While uncommon, one or two from every class generally didn't have it in them to perform the rigorous acts and maneuvers. Those that failed their test were looked down upon in the worst of ways, shunned and hated. Cloudsdale had always been a form of nationalism among its occupants. If you weren't the best or didn't show any potential of being the greatest, you weren't allowed to be part of the glorious collective. School moved a little to the side as Orion, a tall yet fairly skinny pony, settled next to her. He fluffed his light brown feathers and gave a worried attempt at a smile as he stared around where he sat. They were sitting in a large open waiting room overlooking the Coliseum. Okay. I think I might be having an anxiety attack. But I digress. Back to the story. With all just visible in the distance, was the factory. Orion glanced at it and gulped. What's the matter, Orion? You afraid of getting a dead-end job on the snow line? Orion chuckled a bit, then closed his eyes and sighed. No, it's just, I don't know. I don't think I can do this. What if I fail? What if I don't fail but do just bad enough to still be disliked by every pony? I don't know if I can take being deported. Where do we even go, anyways? Skulu gave Orion a friendly punch. No one knows you don't. And we're not going to fail. Everyone here is going to be fine. I know I will pass at least, she laughed. Thanks to the tips from Rainbow Dash, I'm sure I'll be fine. Oh yeah, that reassures me. That's actually just as, if not more, reassuring than the psychopathic hate every pony here seems to love to spread. Okay, I'm gonna pause for a second. Ah, crap. Quit panicking, Scary Wings, Skulu replied. The only one here I think might fail is that yellow pony with the dark green mane. She's the one who was sick for that month, you know. Oh yeah, Orion remembered, as he craned his head in the other pony's direction. The one who had that bad case of hoof and wing. She looks pretty confident, though. I suppose we'll see, Skulu trailed, turning to look at the factory herself. It gave her chills, not of fear, but pride. I hope I get something cool. I get some cool active weather job. Can you imagine? Okay, I actually think I'm having an anxiety attack. I hope I get some cool active weather job. Can you imagine everyone in Ponyville and Philadelphia staring up at me going, there goes Skulu. Such an amazing flyer, and from Cloudstown. There can be no doubt. She smiled in excitement, forgetting her tension for the moment. That would be something, I admit it. Mind you, just coming from Cloudsdale, who wouldn't be in awe? Exactly. Praise the flock. Praise the flock. Places every pony, a massive, buff Pegasus walked towards the entrance of the Coliseum. We're going to do this by name. Your educators are on the east side of the field. Do not, I repeat, do not fly too far west. If they lose sight of you for any reason, you will be failed immediately. Take deep breaths, stretch your wings one last time. The test will consist of 3 sections. Weather clearing, agility, and finally, recovery. Clear the clouds, fly through the hoops, and then fly to the marked elevation. Close your wings for at least 3 seconds. Any less, and you'll be failed. But keep in mind, there is no extra points for extra seconds. Finally, recover before you hit the cloud floor. Understood? Any questions? The instructor paused and carefully glanced at every single pony in the room. Everyone's eyes were completely focused on him, and none of them were creased with confusion. All right, Aurora Dawn, you're up first. Clear, fly, fall, complete. The yellow pony nodded and walked quickly up to the starting ramp with purpose. She stared at the watching judges, waited for a nod from all 3, and then took off with a powerful force. The ramp bounced slightly from the force of the takeoff. Every pony watched as Aurora quickly reached the starting altitude and then began to direct began a direct and powerful attack on the positioned clouds. With expert timing and intelligent angles, the sky was soon empty of any moisture. Skulu and Orion watched with their mouths open as they watched the first testee pull fast and tight turns, expertly shooting dead center through each and every hoop. Finally, Aurora pulled herself up to the proper altitude, hovered, and closed her wings. The group of students gasped as she started plummeting down towards the clouds, and counted breathlessly. 1, 2, 3. They sighed as they watched her open her wings in the correct amount of time. Collectively holding that belief, suddenly Aurora's wings whipped upwards. The group of students flinched in horror. as they all heard a loud, hollow snap, only to be suddenly replaced with an unending, piercing scream. Many, like Orion, shielded their eyes with their wings, as others, like Skulu, could only watch, terrified as the blur of yellow and green and red plummeted into the cloud with a dull thump. Wasting no time, the instructor walked forward again as the three judges simply pointed down. And started shuffling papers around. Speaking loudly, as if nothing had happened, he called out again. Daisy Fields, clear, fly, full, complete. Skulu and Orion stared slack-jawed as another pony gulped and walked up onto the path and took off. They turned back to the tuft of cloud where Aurora landed and stared as the wind blew the fragments that were thrown up from the collision away. They saw the shivering yellow body attempt to move, only to collapse with a cry. Friday's spots. Clear, fly, fall, complete. Aurora still struggled to walk, wailing with every step. Her legs weren't broken. She could use them just fine, but it was obvious the pain from her wing joints and the loss of her potential life was crushing her. Skulu and Orion shuffled uneasily, tears welling in his eyes. Skulu felt Orion shuffle uneasily, tears welling in his eyes as a frown formed on his face. How they shine. Clear, fly, all complete. No one's coming to help her. Orion seethed through his closed teeth. Skulu felt extremely sad for the yellow Pegasus, but couldn't see herself helping her. She would be failed herself and sent away, far away from Cloudsdale in any familiar place unquestioned, to a place where she and any other failed students could never stain Cloudsdale's reputation. It was a terrible shame, but Skulu couldn't fail herself. She couldn't fail her friends, and she definitely couldn't fail Rainbow Dash, not after the care and help she had given her Skulu's whole life. Skulu blinked the tears from her eyes and forced herself to watch the competing students, one after another, took off, successfully passed the test, and flew to the east gate. Under the judge's spot in the stands, that's all Skulu focused on. Pass the test, fly to the gate, live a happy life. Orion Solstice. Clear, fly, fall, complete. No. What? The instructors took a step back, one left leg left raised in the air. You can't just refuse the flight test. Get out here before you make the judges mad. No, don't even pretend you care about my future if you don't care about hers. Orion defied, unsure about himself. You say you want me to get a good life, and yet you let those who fail suffer unbearable pain. Get the heck onto that field before I fail you myself, the instructor shouted menacingly. Fine, Orion spoke sharply before he walked onto a ramp. He stared at the judges, waited for each of the individual nods, and the second they came, he took off. However, long before the starting altitude, he turned sharply and landed gently next to Aurora. She turned and looked at him, blood running down her face and sides, and tears streaming down her face. What are you doing? You'll fail like me. You'll be exiled. I'd rather be exiled from a place that treats ponies like this than live my life while others don't live theirs. Aurora smiled, happiness briefly replacing her sadness in her black and puffy eyes. Until she stumbled again and intense pain flushed across her body. Orion leaned close, using his wing to brace the yellow pony against himself. He stared up at the judges, beaming hate with his vision. They stared down, unaffected, and simply pointed down before looking back towards the ramp for the next contestant. Crap, my neck. Okay. Next paragraph. School stood shocked, hardly hearing her name called. She moved numbly up to the ramp, never taking her eyes off her friend and the pony who sacrificed himself to help. After a brief moment, she shook her head, recovered her thoughts, and looked to the judges. Thoughts passed through her head as she watched them all nod. Oh, Celestia, what do I do? I can't let everyone I know down. But I'll never see Orion again. I suppose he'll be no at risk when he did that. I'm sure he's thinking the same thing right now. She glanced at Orion. He was looking at her. He wasn't looking at her. She took off, heartbroken. Instinct kicked in as the familiar rush of wind cooled her and blew her thoughts away. She stopped at the right altitude and then launched again, sensing and seeing every cloud, formulating a game plan in a matter of a couple dozen seconds. The sky was clear. She did a quick loop in mid-flight, aiming at the pursuit with a powerful flash of her wings. She propelled forward through the first ring and then the second and the third, expertly turning and drifting. She curved in towards the second-to-last ring, near the bottom of the field. As she descended, she caught the sight of Orion and Aurora. Almost at the west gate now, Orion turned his head and smiled weakly. Scootaloo's focus shattered. Orion knew what he did. He cared about her. He'd miss her. And he'd never get to say goodbye. Ow. Okay, that's anxiety, people. Sharp pain. Or maybe it's me looking down. One do. This has never happened before. I promise. Okay. She did it. Scootaloo cranked into the bottom part of the ring, falling backward several feet and hitting the ground with a sudden intense flash of fear. She flipped herself onto her feet and began flapping her wings, levitating off the ground. Maybe that didn't count as a failure, she thought. I could still fly. There was a distraction on the field. She spun around to the judges to see three who's pointed down. Scootaloo started crying. Tears welling up and blurring her vision. This wasn't right. This shouldn't have happened. None of it. Orion should have passed his test and cheered her on from the east gate. She shouldn't have looked at him. She should have focused on flying. But there was no room for excuses. Defeated, she slowly hovered towards Orion and settled next to him. She looked at him with her purple eyes. He looked back, offering a smile. You did a good job. Scootaloo dropped her head and sobbed. Then she walked around Orion and lifted a wing of her own and helped Aurora walk to the west gate. Before them stood a long, unlit hall with only a cheap sign stuck to the wall notifying test failures to proceed down the hall. They waited only briefly to gather themselves and prepare for what they would be taken, where they would be taken, and then all stepped forward together. Let's delve deeper into rainbow philosophy, far beyond the Cloudsdale mythology. It's easy to misjudge that floating city with its alluring decor and social psychology. Against the empty carriage at the end of the lonely hall were three imposing ponies, leaning in distended in bored pose. One of them happened to look up as the sorry-looking trio stumbled out into the open. They were on the bottom edge of the Colosseum, with the vast rolling hills and plains of Equestria visible far below. Hey, boss, we got some of them worthless pony, Pegasuses. The first one called out to an even bigger pony on the other side of the carriage. I suppose it's get to work time, is it? Cool it, hotshot. There may be more, too. No, I was the last student to go. Scootaloo spoke in sobs. Orion could only hang his head. She paused and breathed deeply, determined to remain as strong as she could. It's just our three. Aurora's wings. They're broken. She needs help. Ain't that just a crying shame? What's it to us? Well, the better she don't come flying back to us no more. We may have failed our dang test, but that doesn't mean we're not worthless to keep alive. I said that in the wrong voice, so I'm just going to continue like I had said it in the right one. Orion shouted in a flash of rage. He was determined to hold on to as much dignity as he could. All right, sheesh. Hey, Patches, doctor her up before we head out. I don't want any blood on them seats. I just washed that thing. You other two, in the cart. Ryan and Scootley hopped into the carriage, and as he got as comfortable as they could on the hard seats, but made sure to leave room for Aurora. As soon as the third of the large ponies finished bandaging her wings, Aurora carefully stepped onto the vehicle and lay down on the bench at the back. Scootley inched closer to her and leaned down to talk as the door to the carriage slammed shut. The boss pony was inside of the back, standing by the door, watching each of them. So, Scootley began quietly, trying not to speak too loudly. You're Aurora? I'm Scootley. I'm sorry we had to meet like this. Any meeting of a friend is a welcome meeting. Aurora spoke gently with sincerity in her eyes. We did our best. That's all we could say. That's all any of us can say. Who's to say that the city of the deported isn't a good one, anyways? The thought struck Scootley as she considered it. No one was ever told about where Pegasi were brought. Most ponies considered it to be some odd land like where the zebras hailed from. That made Scootley realize something profound. Hey, if where they're taking us is where Zakora's from, then there's gotta be a way back. It's not as if we're banned from Equestria. Fluttershy, an old friend of mine, she's a Pegasus who lives in Ponyville. She never passed her flight test. She never even took the test. They've never come and taken her away. Exactly, Aurora agreed with a nod. Orion overheard and offered his thoughts. I think the reason we're sent far away is because no pony from Cloudsdale ever wants to admit that someone who failed flight school could come from their city. What a flippin' horrible place. Now that I think of it, I never want to go back. Maybe that's why no Pegasus ever comes back. They just don't like Cloudsdale. You goddamn worthless ponies that can hardly call yourself Pegasus. Boss spoke from the door. He was swaying ever so slightly as the carriage was lifted and moved into an unknown location. Unless failures is what you are, no pony come back from exile regardless the reason. Can't even pass your goddamn test. You three make me sick. Scootley jumped up on her seat, lifted herself into the air with her wings, and dove leg first at Boss. You shut the heck up about us. You have no right to treat others like this. Boss raised a hoof and backhanded Scootley out of the air onto the floor. I can treat you however I want. You can hardly classify as ponies to Cloudsdale or any other Equestria for that matter. Now sit the heck down and shut up until you get to your destination. Where are we being taken anyways? Not like we can tell anyone now. I'm sure as deliverers you guys should know, Orion cautiously reasoned. Heck if I know. We hand the carriage over to the ponies in suits. We get a bag full of coins to keep quiet about the whole thing. It's how it's always been for 1,000 years. The three fillies huddled together, scared of the unknown. They kept quiet as they waited through the unbearable trip, all lost in their own thoughts. This story's getting good, I hope. To you, anyways. It's getting good to me. Friends, family, loved ones, and pets. All will never be seen. All will never see them again. And some would never find out why. An hour passed, and then another. Finally, the uncomfortable quiet was broken by a sudden lurch of the carriage, as the carriage stopped in its flight. Boss smiled. There's my stuff. You ponies play nice now. Have fun where the heck you sent to. The carriage door shuffled open, and Boss hopped out with a gust of cold wind. It was dark outside with hardly any light to see in all. Scootaloo stared outside and noticed another figure staring in. He was dressed in a black suit. Its tail dyed an unnatural black that was never occurred in nature. Its face was covered by a dark, loose-fitting mask concealing its mane. All that was visible were rose-colored eyes. Look on the screen at the character's eyes. Intense. I've already read this. Psyched myself up before I started reading this. I really hope you guys are seeing the character on the screen only and nothing else. I really do hope. But yeah, the pictures. But I'm taking a break here because my neck really hurts. I give full props of the story to the creator, Aurora Dawn, and her friend. I forget his name at the time. And the picture belongs to the person whose name is on the screen. Nasuki100 at deviantart.com. I probably messed that name up. Okay. So, if you don't know why I was so quiet for a little while, it was because I plugged my iPad in and I think I might have just lost where we were. All that was visible were the rose-colored eyes, staring indefinitely at the three ponies inside. They stopped on Scootaloo momentarily, unrecognizing, but she stared back. A second passed, the dark pony slammed the door shut, and the carriage took off once again. At least we can talk now, Aurora whispered in the dark, but they had nothing to talk about. But with all great things comes great responsibility, with clouds not being weather stability. The three desolate fools blinked their eyes awake, having all resolved to conserve energy for whatever came next. With a loud scraping noise, the door shook and swung wide open. Several more ponies, obscured by masks and suits, were moving around the area. Scootaloo blinked again. It's the light. And what she was seeing there were in a cloud building. They were in a cloud building. As her eyes adjusted, she noticed more details. Several of the blackened ponies were rushing around, some holding clipboards, some carrying briefcases and others important-looking items on their backs. The complex was full of machinery and signs. Pipes ran along the ceiling, and the loud whir bang ran in the background, occasionally joined with other industrial sounds such as crashes and alarms. Scootaloo gasped. This place, this architecture. It's all so familiar. I think we're in the weather factory. Orion frowned. That can't be right. We were traveling for way too long. We've got to be far away from Equestria now. Not to mention the city. Actually, Scootaloo might be right, Orion mused. I noticed it was maybe the same amount of time from when we left the Colosseum to the place the carriage driver swapped, that it was from the swap place to here. I don't know. I'm confused. Maybe that's just a coincidence. Welcome, mules, a large, powerful voice commanded. Several of the suited ponies moved to make way for a deep, dark red Pegasus dressed in a white lab coat. You degenerates are probably wondering where exactly you are. Stupid fillies, you're in Cloudsdale, the Rainbow Factory to be correct. Allow me to show you around. What's going on here? Do you expect us to use us as slaves? Because I'd rather be deported, thanks, Skulu yelled. Orion and Aurora got off their seats and stood behind Skulu, nodding in agreement. Like you failures have much a choice. You'll be here the rest of your lives. Oh, I'm sorry. Where are my manners? I am Dr. Atmosphere. My degree is a medical one, I shall reassure you, in case you were picturing some dreadful surgery going on behind the scenes. Strange how many worthless Pegasi get that idea. No, my degree is in engineering. I'm one of the four colts in this facility. I'm sure you all have the tour of the lower factory now. The three ponies nodded slowly, unsure of what was going on. Excellent! Who can tell me where the tour begins? Ryan spoke up first. Where Spectre comes from upstairs in his mix. Very good! What a pity. Utterly useless to the flock. He could have been a smart one. Dr. Atmosphere smiled sadistically and patted Orion on the head. But today, we're on the upper floor. Please follow me and don't get too far behind. One of my helpers will be forced to encourage you. With that, he winked at the suited ponies. With nods, three of them at the rear end leaned forward and jabbed each of the pegs with tasers, shocking them to the ground. Dr. Atmosphere whined with laughter as they all yelped and fell, and continued into a soft chuckle as they all stood up again. Skulu blinked more tears from her eyes and shook herself again, trying to lose the tingling in her nerves. She turned and quickly looked at each of the suited ponies, catching each of them in the eye when she could. None of them were the rose-eyed pony from the carriage. Burgundy. Begrudgingly, she started walking behind the red engineer. You simply must be careful in this department, Dr. Atmosphere began in a tone not unlike many tour guides on the lower floor. There's plenty of nooks and crannies and vents and vats one could fall into. One must be careful not to hurt themselves. After all, you're all helpless as it is. Any more so, and even we couldn't use you. He glanced behind himself maliciously. As the three fools frowned in insult, they were walking down a series of halls with vibrating machines and assembly lines lining in the way. Occasionally ducking under low-hanging wires, or carefully stepping over steaming pipes. As they walked, though, the building became cooler and cooler. As all three were watching, sensing, looking for a way out, they couldn't see any. Now let me tell you a story. Cloudsdale is where weather is made. Without us, the rest of Equestria would starve, freeze, drown, or generally be a not very happy place. That gives us the special one that can't be tainted by incompetent fools like you. How in the world could you? How could the world look up and trust us if a Pegasi like you are flying around wearing the Cloudsdale name? No, we needed to do something with all of you, and then we got a delicious idea. One day, 1,000 years ago. Those were some of the smart ponies back then, I say. You don't find too many of them nowadays. But I digress. Here now. Through these doors quickly now before more find too many of them these days. For more encouragement to supply darker atmosphere, opened a heavy-looking door in a cramped corridor. He and offered a hoof inside. Scooter stared up at him. He glanced at a suited pony. Scooter and the others walked inside. As he laughed again, "Enjoy the rest of your pitiful life." And with that, he slammed the door closed. They all turned and looked at the big room they had been led to. It was fairly open and empty, almost like a theater room. At one end of the room there were 6 square beds, each one nearly full of individual spectra. Above them was a peculiar looking machine. From the central stack, 6 hoses broke off and led above each of the individual vats. At the top of the stack was a single opening, red with rust despite the rest of the machine being shiny and clean. Even further above that was a fairly complex-looking object with chains and gears hanging off the beams and pipes loosely. Running even higher than the whole machine was a length of scaffolding, with doors on either side leading out of the room, down on the floor below. On the floor, a small collection of defeated, crying ponies sat, chatting quietly. "Those suits there. Those are from that other flight school across town," Aurora informed, sounding shocked. "And those other ponies sitting over there, see? I remember a trip we went on once with the Levitating Acres private school. I remember them from that trip." "So, this is where the failures go? Not deported, but forced to work forever?" Orion stopped quietly, and exchanging for helping someone, he had doomed himself and his good friend to a life of servitude. Scooby reached a reassuring wing over and lifted his chin. She smiled at him, understanding his depression. "At least we don't have to go through it alone," she cooed softly. Suddenly there was commotion in the group of ex-students. One pony from an unidentified school took off, headed towards one of the doors of the scaffolding. Immediately, 2 suited ponies launched at record speed and both clipped the flyaway with their tasers. The pony spasmed in the air and dropped like a stone, with an audible crack as he landed, and a violent burst of twitching. All of the ponies walked back, staring horrified at their friend. They watched helpfully for a long time. He didn't move. Some cried softly. Most others turned away, too far confused to feel any more emotions. "I guess that option's out," Aurora said to no one in particular. "But you can't fly away. You can't fly right now, anyways. That medic guy, Patches, or whatever he was called, he popped my wounds back into the joints and bandaged up one of the skin tool. I won't be winning any races, but I can fly again." I think my accent for Aurora is changing. I don't know why. Okay, let me take a quick little second. Oh, my neck. So, I need to check the time. 4:04. Cool. Still got time. They slowly walked forwards and joined the group of homies, looking at each other with understanding sorrow. "Eyes front and center, you inept mules," one of the suited ponies shouted after the previous display. No one challenged that order and stared at the scaffolding, just as one of the doors opened. "How, you ask, are they up to the task?" To which the answer is in a simple facility. A few official-looking pigs walked on the scaffolding and turned to look around on the group with disgust. One of them stood onto a small podium sat up in the center and began speaking loudly and clearly. By now you've all clearly determined that you are not going into exile. There is no deportation. There never was. There never was. You are in the factory. You will never leave the factory. And though you may be called useless, that is not entirely true. You are worthless to the flock as a pony, but you still have a purpose. Purpose to all ponies in this land, far and wide. You get to help us make rainbows. Beautiful, magical rainbows. Doesn't that excite you? The mysterious announcer grinned ecstatically, taking in all the disgust from every fallen floorboard. I thought so! He chuckled. Isn't it such an honor? You know, it leaves every pony entrusted with the task speechless, too. Now, do we have any volunteers? Again, every pony below glared with hate. One brave pony, the light pink one from Levitating Acres, walked forward a few steps and then yelled. How could you ever get away with this? How could Celestia or even Luna know about this and tolerate it? It's slavery. It's torture. I think you'll find it's more than that. A second official pony walked out of the shadows and up the podium. The pony was in a suit and mask. The first pony walked off the podium and allowed the second to talk. Scootaloo noticed that it was the rose-eyed pony from before. She watched more intently now. The voice was familiar. 1,000 years ago, when Celestia banished Luna from Equestria and sent her to the moon, she was charged with 3 tasks. Originally, she was in charge of raising the sun and showering the land in rainbows. But with the moon being an additional task, she had to hand down the responsibility of rainbows. Celestia entrusted Pegasi of Cloudsdale to make the rainbows for her from then on. For the first dozen years, we were given powerful unicorns to create spectra. Spectra is pure pigment, pure color. Everything is full of spectra. But you can't just harvest it. You can never separate color from an object. So it was made artificially with magic. The masked pony never took her eyes off the pink one. That is, until our top engineers made a breakthrough. They discovered an ingenious way to extract pigment, and it was so beautiful. Even a simple machine could do it. But it couldn't be done with just anything. The conditions had to be right. What did those horrible people do? The pink Pegasus screamed, growing angrier by the minute. The mysterious pony whipped off her mask, unveiling more than her rose eyes. Her skin was a light cyan, and her mane was a gorgeous rainbow. Several of the fillies gasped. Scootaloo's knees weakened as it hit her. It was Rainbow Dash. Scootaloo's thoughts raced in her mind, and the room started spinning. It couldn't be. An evil twin, maybe? Perhaps some neglected sister. Rainbow Dash couldn't be this evil. She was her friend, her mentor, her only family. Even if not by blood. How was all she could think. It had to be live ponies. Only in ponies where magic and spectra ran freely together. Rainbow Dash threw her head back and laughed maniacally. Only then could spectra be separated. And it was such a beautiful idea. Such a wonderfully horrible idea. It worked so well. We could create exponentially more rainbows of better quality and with real spectra. It finally gave us a way to prevent Cloudsdale from ever being tainted by all of those horrible Pegasus which couldn't fly. Scootaloo couldn't take it, while the other ponies were explaining their disgust and fear, running and screaming for where they came in, backing off. The secluded ponies surrounded them, and herded them back into the center of the floor. Scootaloo couldn't take it anymore. I thought you loved me. I probably said that too quiet, so I'm going to repeat it. I thought you loved me. Scootaloo wailed, cutting Rainbow Dash's laughter short. Huh? She turned and noticed the amber-orange Pegasus. I thought you loved me. How could you do this to me? I thought you cared for me. After all my help, all my life, you've treated me like a sister. And I treated you like my big sister. You were my big sister to me. You were the only family I ever had, and you knew it. Tears were pouring down her face, obscuring her vision again. Her throat hurt from crying and shouting, but she couldn't stop. After everything, you're just going to let me die? I tried so hard for you. She stared at the floor for a moment. Everyone was silent. Scootaloo looked up. While she couldn't see the sadness in her eyes, she looked straight at Rainbow Dash, straight into those rosy eyes, past them and deep into Rainbow Dash herself. I thought you loved me. Rainbow Dash returned the look. Her eyes revealed no emotion, no love, no care, only apathy. Slowly, however, they glared at Scootaloo. Pure, seething hate erupted from Rainbow Dash's mouth as she screamed, I did love you. I tried so hard for you. I told you everything I knew in hopes that you would pass your test. You had it in you, kid. I knew what they did here. Ever since I performed the sonic rainbow and they approached me, they wanted to find more ways to make spectrum. They thought that if I was capable of making rainbows, I could help them make its components. Well, they couldn't. But I learned a lot about this place. I'm the manager here now. You know, I worked my way up in secret, pretending to only be a simple weather control. To be simple weather control. How do you think I could afford that massive house over Ponyville? How do you... She trailed, shaking her head, remembering her anger suddenly. I tried, all right. It was up to you to save yourself. You didn't just fail yourself. You didn't just fail Cloudsdale. You failed me. And that's the worst thing you could have done. You are just dead to Cloudsdale. Now you're dead to me. The ring tilted as Scootaloo tried to comprehend what she was told. Her mind broke. She was totally unable to focus on anything. She stumbled slightly until Orion held open the wing, and she clung to it for stability. Rainbow Dash noticed this and yelled with more fury, You can't have happiness! You ruined me! Now I'm going to ruin you! Workers, the brown one there! Him first! No! Scootaloo and Aurora and Orion jumped. Suited ponies cornered Orion, pushing the other two to the side. He tried to leap out of the way to run, but one of the stallions spun around and kicked him. The hoof connected with his shoulder, and Orion collapsed with a shout. Get back! More suits yelled at Aurora and Scootaloo as they dragged the whimpering Orion to the front of the room. The giant machine at the back started humming to life, and the assembly chain lifted off the top and moved towards the ground. Everyone noticed they were shackles now, and the suits clasped Orion into them, braving. Look up, he turned to Scootaloo. Don't worry, Scoots. I love you. Goodbye. Goodbye, Orion. Scootaloo gasped. I love you too. With that, the chains pulled tight and lifted the brown Pegasus all the way up to the gears. The chains grew tight and stretched each of Orion's limbs straight up and down. We find the machine works better if the ribs are broken, Rainbow Dash explained apathetically as the chain spun around in opposite directions, twisting Orion. His screams almost covered the echoing pops and shattering noises. One or two jagged bones tore through his side, and his yells faded to a slow, quiet rattle of breath. Sorry about that. chains untwisted and the shackles open, dropping the shattered pony into a single opening. Skilly watched in horror, her brain overcome with what was happening. Detached from all emotion, she noticed that the top of the machine wasn't rusty. It was blood. Blood just like what was being tossed from the mangled remains of Orion, as the rest of his body was swallowed into the great machine, finishing with one long hoof, directed straight up, and then nothing was left. As the hoses over the green and red pads of spectrum started spewing the brilliant colors, Skiller's vision started to fade, and the last thing she noticed was Aurora's concern, broken voice saying her name, as Skiller flopped to one side. Well then, that was depressing. Look, I know the story is serious. Okay. My voice is hurting because I'm not reading in my normal voice. And my Coca-Cola's not helping. What's my controller for my Xbox there? Ow. Okay. Give me a second. I need water. Okay, know that I'm going to take one of these breaks quite a few times because this is the first time I'm doing this and I'm kind of nervous. So, yeah. More drunk. And let's get back to the story. In the Rainbow Factory, where fears and horrors come true. In the Rainbow Factory, where not a single soul gets through. Skilly, get up! Get up! Now hurry, Skilly, wake up! Wake up! Skilly shook her head briefly, wondering where she was and what was happening. In a flash, it all came back, and she jumped to her feet. Aurora was shaking her, bright encasing her vision. The suits were starting to approach the two now, tasers and shackles up, ready. Skilly, they're coming for us. What do we do? What do we do? Skilly looked for an opening. All the doors were blocked except for one, on the scaffolding. The suited ponies were slowly approaching, not rushing, in order to prevent the fillies from freaking out. Fear was their tool. Skilly spun around, looking for an exit. There was only the one. She realized. I have a plan, she whispered to Aurora. What's that? Clear, fly, fall, complete. Aurora nodded in understanding, her eyes widening. She repeated louder so that the other frightened fillies could hear. Clear, fly, fall, complete. Got it. 1, Skulu started counting. 2, Aurora squeaked as she backed into Skulu. And the suits were mere feet away now. 3! A collective shout reverberated around the room as every filly that could actually fly took off. The suited ponies gasped and fell back, unsure where to go. There was too much confusion. Only a few faster-thinking ones took off as well. Tasers at the ready, aiming at the closest Pegasus they could take. Step 1, Skulu screamed. Clear! With her command, the failures started targeting the dark ponies in droves. Hooves connected with heads, and while some of the other students fell lifeless to the floor, the majority of casualties were the suited ponies. Skulu and Aurora landed on the scaffolding right by the door. and reached to open it. It was locked. Oh God, what do we do? What do we do now? Aurora cried. We're still unclear, she shouted, turning. Scootaloo shouted, turning around and bucking the door. Aurora followed her, focusing on the brunt of her blows on the part of the wall where the latch would be. Sorry I had to do that. And Rainbow Dash on the other side of the scaffolding recovered from her initial shock in the rebellion and noticed Scootaloo pounding on the door. Kill her! She screamed at the other important ponies. Kill her! She started to gallop towards the fillies, forgetting her wings momentarily. Scootaloo closed her eyes, pounding harder and harder on the door. It started to creak and splinter. Any second now, she thought. Rainbow Dash will get here. It's over. I'm doomed. She would have cried, but there were no more tears left. But nothing came. The door started to split from its frame, now leaning inwards. It wouldn't be long until it was open. She opened her clenched eyes, peeking up at the scaffolding, remembering the remaining ponies were there, pressing together, holding the enraged blue Pegasus and her cronies back. They wouldn't last long, however, even as Scootaloo watched, twitching and yelping ponies were falling to the floor below, some even landing in the great maw of the Spectral machine. The pink pony from Levitating Acres was there, and she turned to Scootaloo and Aurora, just as the doors blew back into the hall behind. Fly, the pink pony demanded with pain in her voice. She opened her mouth to speak again, but it was cut short as the pile of ponies, Pegasi blew apart, with Rainbow Dash standing enraged in the opening. She was on her two back hooves, her front two rolling in the air. A small gash down her side leaked red, and her multicolored vein was torn in a patch. An unearthly howl passed her lips, and her rose eyes were drained of any sanity that was left. Come on, Aurora, Scootaloo pleaded as she spun around. We've got to fly to get if we are going to live. I can't. This is too much. I haven't healed. Aurora looked at Scootaloo with wide open eyes. You go, Scootaloo. To everyone what happens here, let them know. She glanced back at the wall of students, almost bare now as Rainbow Dash's bloodlust tore them to pieces. Her blue coat was now glistening crimson, almost dripping as she ignored the need for live ponies. There would be more. Cloudsdale could take a small shortage of rainbows. In another few months, there would be more tests, more failures. But for now, all she knew is that Scootaloo had to die, violently if possible. Decades of working for the Rainbow Factory had fractured her. She was the only one allowed in public, and keeping a horrible secret with her since childhood had only led to psychological problems, and no amount of therapy could cure. Scootaloo was her last link on sanity, and her failure had deleted that. There was no logic in her mind anymore, no care, no capacity for compassion, only hate, pure, concentrated, and evil hatred filled the gap her love for Scootaloo had once occupied. Rainbow Dash was no more. Only this monster remained. I hardly knew you, Aurora, Scootaloo cooed softly into the yellow Pegasus beside her. I'm sorry I never knew you until all this. I'm sorry we had to meet like this. I'm sorry we have to part like this, she sniffed, and had found more tears. Any meeting of a friend is a welcome meeting, Aurora reassured Scootaloo. Now you have the other pony. Fly, Scootaloo. Fly. Goodbye. Goodbye, Aurora. With that, Sugulu levitated and spun around, looked into the yellow pony's eyes one last time, and launched down the cramped corridor. She had no idea where she was going, but any chance at freedom was one she had to take. Aurora blinked a couple times, standing in front of the door. Rainbow Dash would have at least had one obstacle in her way to school. The blue pony tossed the last of the other students over the scaffolding and slowly walked towards Aurora. How cute! You think you, a useless, broken pile of manure, could possibly stand in my way? You really make me laugh. None of you can compete with the awesome power I have. Love can overcome any evils of this world. Aurora straightened herself in rebellion as Rainbow Dash stopped in front of her. Aurora stayed in front of Rainbow Dash, barring her entry down the corridor beyond. Well then, let's see if love will overcome this one. And with that, Rainbow Dash grabbed one of Aurora's bandaged wings and pulled, tearing it off completely. Aurora collapsed to her knees, grinding her teeth in horrible pain. But she didn't scream. She wouldn't give in to Rainbow Dash. Rainbow grabbed her other wing and dragged her kicking and moaning down the center of the scaffolding. She lifted Aurora up by the wing, laughing quietly to herself, as the look of intense agony appeared on Aurora's face. Rainbow Dash took to the air, bringing the squirming yellow and green pony with her over the top of the machine. With a squeak of evil laughter, she jerked at the wing with her hoof. It too disconnected from the now convulsing Pegasus, and Aurora fell. She landed head first. The door to the scaffolding closed with a gust of wind, just as the machine started pumping the brightest greens and yellow it had ever produced. There was no one around to see it. Well, that's depressing. Brand new friend taken to a factory in exile where they were bound for death. Now trapped in a machine dying. That's just depressing, man. What time is it? Oh wow, 4:28. It feels like it's been less than that. Skilly glanced backwards momentarily, her heart pounding, the noise of the constant thump, thump, thump drowned out any other sounds in her head. Her ears throbbing along with it. The corridor was just like the other that led to the theater room, cramped with dozens of obstacles, jutting out at random intervals. Straight behind her, maybe 500 meters now, the bloody mare that used to be Rainbow Dash was cruising along herself. Both Pegasi were completely straight, hooves forward, wings beating at an impossible count, one trying to escape, the other trying to capture. Scooby leaned forward again, focusing on what lay ahead of her. That's all that matters, she thought. What's ahead of me? There's no changing what's behind me. Ignore it. Focus. The second time in many days, a flood of instinct overtook Scooby. And despite the terror she felt in her body, the sorrow that had surrounded her, and the evil behind her, her worries melted away, and the thought of flying encased her very being. Down under wires and pipes, she ducked up and around various workers whose complaints and shouts were ignored, only to be repeated momentarily as the raging pony behind collided with them. Her body doing the flying school's thoughts turned to escape opportunities. She whipped around sharp corners at impossible speeds, zipped up and down countless sets of stairs trying to shake her murderous tail, but to no avail. She she contemplated the... Okay, I'm sorry about that as well. Down on the wires, trying to shake her murderous tail, but to no avail. She contemplated every nook and cranny she passed, briefly considering hiding. She struck that idea down. As insane as Rainbow Dash may be, she was still too smart to overlook any possible spot Skulu may be. But there ahead of her, Skulu found a solution. A garbage bin of some kind, sticking out from the wall to the floor below. Momentarily, she gave thought to where it might lead. Whether out of the factory or into some incinerator, she couldn't tell, but it was probably worth the risk. She snuck one last glance behind her to make sure the unstable mare was far away enough. Rainbow Dash was paying no attention to any hazard as she sought her prey, tearing through electrical wires and ricocheting off heated pipes, going through any obstacle rather than around it to save time. But the collision slowed her down enough to give Skulu a chance. She slammed to a sudden halt over an open vent, hoping for her life. Fall, she muttered, closing her eyes and opening her wings. Closing her eyes and wings. Resisting the urge to flap immediately, she counted silently to herself as the shadows rushed past her closed eyes, hoping for the best of where this vent led. 1, 2, 3. She opened her eyes and wings and looked up. Hovering, Rainbow Dash was above, looking down into the vent. Her eyes were buggy and twitched, her hooves pounded on the edge of the vent. She was too large to follow. The filly had barely made it herself, but then the anger in her face vanished, only to be replaced with a malicious grin. She started laughing again, the cackle echoing down the vent and reverberating in Skulu's mind. "You moron! You never did have a good sense of direction," she teased, laughing again. Skulu finally looked down, getting her bearings. "Oh no," she squealed. She was in the theater room again, only by now it was full of suited ponies circling her. Their masked faces seemed to be grinning at her as Rainbow Dash shouted orders down the vent. "Don't let her die! I must do it! Subdue her! Catch her!" She whined in glorious victory as the suit shot Skulu with a taser. As her limp body began to fall from the air, caught her and brought her to the floor. Skulu blacked out momentarily as the electricity passed through her. She came to lying on the cold, cold floor, metal shackles preventing her from moving, and she was struggling to get free. She could hardly shake the chains. Lifted her slightly, bringing her small body eye to eye with the Pegasus in front of her. The pony was a deep blood red, glistening in the artificial light of the factory. Her mane had small spots of glorious colors of the rainbow, but mostly the same red color as her coat of fur. Chunks of her skin were missing, and the small bonds in her hair was ripped in some places, bald patches of skin in others. The only clue Skulu had as to who this used to be were those rose irises focused on her. "Any final words, you miserable, worthless fool?" Skulu brought her chin high, still demanding even the tiniest fraction of dignity. "You have beautiful eyes," she cooed softly, yet clearly. And that ends the main story of Rainbow Factory. There is an ending given to a certain YouTuber on the internet named Mike the Mike. It's in the final part of his series of the reading of this. I want to show you the audio, but I don't want to get copyright hit. I don't want to get hit with copyright. So, I'll just try and leave that in the description below so you guys can go check that out. So, I hope you've enjoyed my reading for this day. I hope you forgive my many mess-ups. And after that long reading and pain in my neck and Coca-Cola drinking, which my Coca-Cola is still at half, I hope you enjoyed. See you all later. Bye.